Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig out of Star Shop Studio in Times Square. And today we are talking about a very relevant topic with one of New York City's top family law attorneys. And she's going to tell us all about the collaborative divorce. She's going to take us all the way through it. And she also wrote an amazing book. She is an author, and it's called Soon to Be X. So we are going to have all the information out there for you to find the book and for you to find Jacqueline Newman, who is our attorney today that we are speaking to. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you are an expert in this area, the collaborative divorce, and you wrote in one of your blogs that January is the month that a lot of people initiate divorce. Is that still the case?
That would still be the case.
And you write, nobody wants to get a divorce, right? Nobody wants a lawyer contacting them as a Christmas present.
Absolutely not.
Which is very true.
Right.
So people wait.
They do.
Yeah.
So January they consider to be divorce month. The major reason being exactly what you had said. You know, you go through the entire year.
Yeah.
You know you want to get out. You want to start the fresh new year fresh. And at that point, people want to gather their information for January and figure out how they're going to get themselves divorced in that next year.
So what do? Do they call your office and say, I'm considering getting a divorce? And then ask you a series of questions?
Yeah, so usually what will happen is that in January, you'll have a lot of people that will set up initial consultations. And at the initial consultation, you'll go through the divorce process. You'll explain to them what the strengths of their cases are, what the weaknesses are. And then they gather all that information, they think about it, because it's obviously a huge decision if you're going to move forward with a divorce. And then what I usually find is that the information gathering stage is in January. February, they digest it. Usually a little after Valentine's Day, if they realize that it didn't go the way they wanted,
right.
Or somebody's
the
sending
gift was bad,
right? Or they're sending Valentine's to the wrong person. Then
you get the card from the lover, or
exactly
something like that, right?
And then March is really a big time for filing of divorce. So that's usually when it happens.
Do you find that there's a certain age that you get more than other ages, or do you find that there's a certain sex that will contact you more? Is it more women? Is it more men?
It's really both. I have to say, a lot of times I'll look and see if I'm representing more men than women, and a lot of times it's pretty much down the middle. And as for age, again, we really take, we have people that are coming in their 30s that realize, maybe the marriage wasn't the right one. And then you have a lot of people that will come in their later 50s, early 60s, because that's when a lot of the children go to college and they realize that things are not exactly what they thought. And, when they don't have the children sitting at the table, they're like, so.
And I write about that in my book, and it's called The Gray Divorce. And there are lots of different reasons for that. And I know we were talking before the show, you had an interesting theory as to why more people might be getting divorced during the middle years.
Yes, I think what's happening, I call it the Facebook perfect situation, where you have a lot of people that are looking on Facebook and every marriage looks perfect. Babies aren't crying. Everybody's smiling and happy. And when they look at that and they think at their own marriage and they're like, well, this doesn't look as good. And so a lot of people, their expectations, they just don't feel met, and people get restless and they get anxious and they want divorce.
So you really think that people look at those pictures and believe it? Because don't we know that there's a lot of PR when it comes to Facebook pictures, and people only present what they want you to see? Do you think people really think, oh, that person's marriage is perfect and mine is not, and initiated a divorce based on that?
I don't know if they initiate the divorce on that, but I think it causes unrest. I think that people really do look at it and, they look all happy. I mean, you look at models. Do you really think that everybody looks exactly like that 24/7? No, but you still compare yourself.
Well, I know I don't. Right.
Who does?
That's true. That's true.
Right.
I thought you were going to say, when you mentioned Facebook, that people find old lovers and the lack of boundaries actually could contribute to more divorces.
I think that happens too. I think it's much easier when you're sitting and you're lonely or you're feeling upset because your spouse is working late or whatever it is. It's just to kind of type something on the computer really fast and spark that interest. So I do think that happens more. It's just easier to reach out to people. But I think that is step two. I think step one is you are in your state of unrest, and then from there, it's easy to...
And one of the things that I have found in my research was that our expectations of marriage are too high. So really, it used to be that people didn't have the same level of expectation. We now really want our partner to meet all of our expectations.
I absolutely agree with that.
And when that doesn't happen, I do think it does trigger an unrest or dissatisfaction. That combined with people living longer. So people at 50
interesting.
or 60 say to themselves, you know, I still look good, I'm still healthy, I still have a lot of years left. Do I really want to be with this person, or do I have the opportunity to be happy with someone else?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak a little bit about that in my book about the expectations. It's very interesting, the fact of living longer. I would absolutely agree with that. And I think you're right. I think that people, you know, people are healthier than they've been in the past. People keep in shape. They're looking much more into fitness.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that people are looking and they're saying, you know what? Maybe I don't need him or her anymore. I can find something better.
What I really loved when I looked at your site was not only are you one of the top family lawyers in the city, and you've been recognized and you're a partner at your law firm, but when you look at your site, you say, listen, really make sure if you want to get a divorce. And so it's not like, well, come, let's sign on the dotted line. Like, come, I can help you, you know, we'll split it, 80, whatever it is. But you really kind of impress upon people who are coming to you, it's expensive, it's
Absolutely.
painful. This is not something that you want to do if you're on the fence, which is really tough, because I can say as a therapist, I know people who have gotten divorces who still question it. There's some who don't, but there's some who do for years and years later, and it can be very, very torturous.
Absolutely. So one of the questions I ask almost every client who walks in is, are you sure you want to get divorced? It's one of my absolutely first questions, because exactly as you said, if they even hesitate for a moment, I say, go see a therapist, such as yourself, and make sure this is it, because you don't want to regret it. It is emotionally expensive, it is financially expensive, you're putting your children through this. Like, you need to make sure there are absolutely no regrets. And so, yeah, I think it's so important to make that decision before coming into the divorce.
I love how you described yourself as the most expensive therapist on the planet, because you're a divorce attorney, which is really true. And you talk about, you know, when people come into you, they really want to make an educated decision, and they say, what will happen to my kids? What will my life look like financially during the information gathering period? So can you tell them about what will happen to their kids? Do you help them figure out whether it makes sense to stay in the marriage or not? Are there certain signs that you can see?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we'll go through, I mean, the custody process is, I think, the most painful process of any type of divorce, obviously. So, yeah, we'll talk about it. And I'm pretty straight. You know,
You're a straight shooter.
Yeah, but I mean, especially when clients walk in, I say, look, this is going to be terrible. Like, you need to know this is going to be terrible.
Wow.
And, you know, and some people have said, are you trying to scare me? I said, yeah, I am, because I need to know that you're ready for this. I need, you know, again, you cannot embark on this. You can't be upset because you didn't put the dishes in the dishwasher, or, you know, she didn't cook dinner, whatever it's going to be. Right. Don't be upset by that and then turn to a divorce attorney. Like, you need to know your life is going to be very, very hard. And a lot of times we talk about the strategic time to get divorced. There's a lot of reasons you might want to wait to get divorced before, you know, pulling the trigger right then. So we talk a lot about that.
So for somebody who wants to get a divorce, when's a good time? Do you find it's the 7-year itch? Do you find it's after 20 years? Is there a certain time?
You know, it really depends on what's going on in their lives. So if, let's say you have a child who's, you know, a sophomore in high school or a junior in high school. Is this really your time? Because ultimately, if they're going to be in college and they're about to turn 18, you're not going to have a custody fight. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it's okay to stay there for another 2 years. If you have somebody who's starting a business and you don't know if that business is going to take off, and if it is, you might want to wait. You might want to, you know, stick it out a little bit more and see if that business is going to, you know, take off before you pull the trigger. I mean, there's just so many reasons that you want to be strategic. And I call it psychological chess. It's not just about the law, it's about figuring out what makes sense.
It must be nice that your parents were psychotherapists as well. I'm a little biased because my husband's a psychiatrist and I'm a psychotherapist. But do you ever sit across from a client and say, oh God, I really don't think they should be getting divorced. This is probably not going to be a right move for them. Do you ever feel that way?
Oh, absolutely.
And do they listen to you?
You know, I think that I am, as I said, I'm direct, and I will say, you know, you're questioning this, and you should be seeing a therapist, and now I'm absolutely going to give them all your names. And they should be seeing a therapist, and they should be making that decision and make sure this is what they want. So, yeah, I mean, you can tell. There are people that will look at me and say, I 100% want a divorce. There's no question in my mind. And then, you know, okay. And a lot of times what will happen in these, especially in January, in these initial consultations, is they're gathering that information to be able to make the educated decision about whether they want to move forward.
Right. And do you feel it's harder if one person wants to get a divorce, and then we'll get into the collaborative divorce, if one person wants it and one person doesn't?
Always. It's always hard. I mean, you're never going to be exactly on the same page. So, and sometimes it'll switch. Sometimes you'll have someone who wanted the divorce, and originally the other spouse is fighting it, and then once they get on board and the other person's like, you know what, let me second think it, they're like, no, I'm done. So that happens. So I always say that you got to be careful about that too.
Be careful what you wish for.
That's exactly right.
It's so funny. I have a friend who's a divorce attorney, and she said the exact same thing. She's like, be careful what you think. The grass is greener on the other side. It's not always greener. And she told me about a story where this woman wanted to get a divorce for her lover, and then she kind of jumped ship, and then her lover wasn't there, and she was left without anyone.
Happens all the time.
Wow.
And there are times I will speak to the girlfriend or the boyfriend of whoever they're involved with.
That must be fun.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah. Hey.
And I'll warn, a lot of times, and I'm going to be a little sexist in saying this, very often I will have men who are involved in relationships, and they're getting a lot of pressure from the girlfriend, and that's what's pushing this divorce. And sometimes they want to enter into really bad deals because they just want it over. And a lot of times I will explain, this isn't the way you have to do this. And also when you're involving kids, that's a whole nother level. You have to be so sensitive about the introduction to children and all of that sort of stuff. And when you have a girlfriend who will say, you know what, you don't like me enough to introduce you to your kids, and that could completely screw up the custody elements of it. So, as I said, there's so many moving parts that you just got to make sure that they're all in line and organized.
Now, let's go to the collaborative divorce. Is everyone a good candidate for this kind of divorce? And let's just go back for a little bit. How is the collaborative divorce different from a regular divorce?
Okay. So collaborative divorce is basically you enter into an agreement saying you're not going to go to court. You'll work with collaboratively trained attorneys, which means we go through a lot of training. And that's the big kicker. If, in fact, the process breaks down, which is self-selecting, so people can choose to do it, and you can also choose to get out of it at any time, you cannot use those same attorneys in litigation. So there's a really big push on settlement. So that's kind of the kicker. You're going to have to start all over again.
Now, isn't that true for anyone who's going through a divorce, that they really don't want to go to litigation, right? I mean, isn't the push really...
Not everyone.
Not everyone?
Yeah.
And is it helpful sometimes to have litigation hanging over a couple's
Yes.
head to say, hey, listen, let's settle on some of these points?
Again, it comes back to the strategy of it. Yes, there are definitely times that litigation, and there are clients that have come into my office, well, I think collaborative law is the best way to do this if you can't do mediation. There are definitely clients that come in, they say, I want to do collaborative. I say, you know what, that might not make sense. We'll still try to settle your case, but you might need that hanging over. You might need that fear for various reasons. But as a general thing, I would say, collaborative is the nice way to do this. The other thing is this interdisciplinary approach. So you bring in divorce coaches, which are therapists trained in the model. You'll bring in a financial neutral if necessary, and a child specialist if applicable.
Now, there are some people that will say, hey, that's a lot of extra people to bring in. It's very expensive. What if somebody's kind of weak-minded and gives into paying for all of these services? Is that a downside for certain people?
It could be, but the way I look at it, I'm the most expensive player on the team. So why are you going to want to work with me to do, say, your statement of net worth when you can work with a financial neutral who's less expensive than I am? Or a child specialist. You're going to have somebody who this is what they do all day long. Why would you not want to involve them? So ultimately, as a combined rate, a lot of times I do find it to be less expensive than having the attorney play each of these roles.
And does it protect you from burnout? Do you feel better about yourself at the end of the day?
With the collaborative?
Yeah.
I like it. I like the collaborative process. I mean, the story I always tell, so I had a client once who, it was a very, very difficult divorce. And it was a collaborative case, and I never thought these people would make it collaboratively. And we went through it, and I will say all the members of the team worked so hard, and we ultimately got them through it. And in the beginning, these people, I mean, they couldn't even look at each other. It was terrible. And they had a young daughter. And I remember at the end, they said, as hard as this was, and while they're not pretending they like each other anymore, but they were like, we will walk down the aisle with our daughter. And to me, that was huge, because in the beginning, they never would have done it. If they litigated, absolutely not.
So, and I know of some cases where people aren't even married and they have a child, and it's really ugly and messy, especially when there's a lot of money involved. So what type of people would you recommend get a collaborative divorce?
Well, usually I would recommend that most people would try mediation first if they can. As long as
and so tell me what the mediation process looks like.
Sure. So the mediation process, you're working with one neutral person generally. Attorneys are usually not in the room. Sometimes they can be, but you have the two clients and the mediator working together to come to an agreement. A lot of times you'll have outside counsel, which would be attorneys that kind of look at this from the client's vantage point, because the mediator is neutral. And so if you could do something like that, that's the best way to do it. A lot of times that doesn't work. There's either power imbalances in the marriage, One person might be so much more financially sophisticated than the other, or people just may say, you know what, I'm not comfortable enough to have this conversation with my spouse with just a mediator. I need an attorney with me. I need someone who I can whisper in their ear and then they can translate it out loud.
And sometimes mediators are attorneys, correct?
More often than not,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. But they're still acting in a neutral capacity.
Okay.
Collaborative law, that's where it's a little different. So collaborative law is where you have your attorneys in the room with you. So, and also they're not acting in the capacity of being neutral, even though they you know who's representing who, because you're really working for the family as a whole as opposed to really just the clients themselves.
Is there a time difference in terms of how long a collaborative divorce takes versus like a traditional divorce?
Well, when you say traditional, you're talking about litigation?
Yes.
Ooh. Okay, so litigation.
Well, I know litigation can take a long time
Long
because that's
time.
in the court, and
Absolutely.
it's also very expensive, and a lot of people end up poor afterward. I just don't understand it. Like, if I'm going to spend all my money, I don't know that I want to spend it that way.
As you shouldn't. I tell
Right.
clients all the time, do you want to send your kids to college or mine? Like, that's how you have to figure it out.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, no, litigation, I mean, again, my office does it. It's a large part of our
Yeah.
practice. Sometimes you just don't have a choice, but if you can avoid it, 100% I would recommend it for
Right.
everybody's sake.
I would imagine that leaves really bitter feelings.
Very often it does.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes if someone doesn't want to do mediation, doesn't want to do collaborative law, or there are reasons it doesn't make sense, you don't have a choice. And a lot of times people think they're going to get this day in court. That's usually your big thing.
They want to be proved right.
Right.
And that's what you really find out is like the judge is not going to make you right.
No.
You may feel that way. It's a fantasy that just does not happen.
It is 100% a fantasy.
How much does a divorce with someone like you cost, or someone like your firm?
It really depends.
Or is there a range?
I
Is there a
mean,
range?
if you're doing like a mediation type of thing,
Right.
I mean, mediations can be, look, if it's very easy and everyone comes in and there's not a lot to settle, I mean, $5,000, $10,000, I'm
Wow.
guessing.
Okay.
But litigation could be millions.
Millions.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I hope we've given everybody a lot of information out there so they can make an educated decision, and hopefully they won't have to get divorced at all, or just
Right.
at least they know their choices, and it's good to be an educated consumer.
Right.
So I thank you so much, and we're going to have information for you to contact Jacqueline if you want to contact her firm. She has a book coming out. She has more books coming out. You can also see her on a lot of the national talk shows sharing information about celebrity divorces. So she is around, and we are just so grateful to have you here with us. And hopefully you'll come back.
I would love that.
And if you want to see more, I'll also have a link to an interview I did with Jacqueline for the Huffington Post, so you can see some more Q&As in a more elaborate print version. And we look forward to seeing you next week on Talking Live. Thanks for